Okay, it's 5:30. President Draper, you can start your meeting. We have a quorum.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, I'm showing directors Jake, Alan, Katie, and Chris are present. Is anybody else present online? So Director Lala and Seaton are absent.
Correct.
Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
This is Director Schweitzer. I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
This is Director Castle. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, motion passes. We are at the public hearing, certified budget amendment for fiscal year 2019 through 2020. We're going to give about 2 minutes, a minute for people to call in at 641-450-5028. And I believe that that will be shown on the screen as well, that number.
Correct, it is. And Director Lala just joined.
Hello.
Hi, Lori. We're at the public hearing for public comment on the certified
Okay.
budget. Is Sherry online?
Yes.
Okay. About a minute. Be there. Just want to make sure we give anyone enough time to call in if they want to. I'm about ready to close this out. I'll give it about 15 to 30 more seconds. Okay, Sherry, we're going to close the public comment section of the public hearing, but Sherry, I would like you to go over the certified budget amendment for fiscal year 19 through 2020 before I call for the roll call vote.
Yes, the reason for the amendment budget is at the time that we had certified our 2019-2020 budget, we had not yet had final numbers for the increased costs for their health and dental plan that the board paid for single health and single dental. So this amendment is due to those increases in premiums per employee.
Okay. Is there a motion? You can read that motion, I believe, on page 8 of your packets.
This is Director Lala. I'll make the motion to approve the certified budget amendment presented for fiscal year 19 through.
Is there a second?
I second. Alan.
Thanks, Alan. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Dave will call for the roll call vote.
Director Lala,
Yes.
Director Schweitzer,
Yes.
Director Castle,
Yes.
Director Kaler,
Yes.
Director Steckman,
Yeah.
Director Draper,
Yes.
Director Seaton, are you there yet? He's absent yet.
Motion passes. Now we're at the resolution for pandemic response and emergencies suspension of policy. Tom, is he online?
Tom is here.
Tom, I'd like you to go over that a little bit before we call for a vote.
Certainly. This begins on page 11 of your packet. This is the third iteration of the resolution. Just a few highlights that I point out. It addresses the return to learn plan that the district is in the process of developing. Also, we will be bringing updated memorandums of understanding to the board that will get us through the rest of the year, likely at the May 18th regular meeting. The resolution addresses pay for non-bargained, non-12-month employees through the end of the year. Also addresses the need for employees to report virtually or in person to participate in voluntary education opportunities. And this resolution replaces previous editions of the resolution and runs through June 30th. Any
One-
questions I can answer?
Just one slight interruption. Sue, if you'd let the record show that Director Seaton joined the meeting at 5:36. Thank you. Questions for Tom?
I just want to reiterate the paper. Basically, what we're doing is ensuring that our staff is being paid through their contract year, paraprofessionals, kitchen, behavioral interventionists, the bus, juvenile court services, secretaries at the 10-month, and we keep extending that date. And then this also allows you a little bit more freedom, liberty, I guess, to oversee that, to make sure they're
Yes,
getting that.
that's the main gist.
Did anybody else have any comments?
No comment.
Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. This is also a roll call vote. Is there a motion? And I believe it is on page 10.
This is Director Kaler. I make a motion to adopt the third resolution, the pandemic response and emergency suspension of policy as presented.
Is there a second?
This is
I
Director
second.
Lala. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave, have you do the roll call vote.
Director Seaton?
Yes. Sorry.
Director Lala?
Yes.
Director Schweitzer?
Yes.
Director Castle?
yes,
Director Kaler?
Yes.
Director Steckman?
Yes.
Director Draper?
Yes. Motion passes. We'll have a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
Okay, this is Director Kaler, and I make a motion that we adjourn the special meeting.
Is there a second?
Director Schweitzer will second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? I just want to let you know we're having the committee of the whole meeting next, so don't go anywhere, even though we're adjourning. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We're now at the committee of the whole.
First item is a presentation by Kingston Life and Health, and Tim Johnston is here. We're going to just rearrange things just a second. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Versteeg, and thank you, Jody. My name is Tim Johnston. I represent Kingston Life and Health, and we are the brokerage firm that works with the Mason City Community School District Health Plan. The purpose of this meeting today is to discuss the plan year preliminary renewal, which would be September 1, 2020 through August 30th of 2021. My intentions are to review what that renewal specifically is, but also the substantiating documentation that leads up to the renewal recommendations with respect to the premiums and reserve fundings. And this is on the heels from some plan changes that we made last year. We put out a packet with 4 different exhibits prior to the meeting, board members. Before I jump into just exhibit 1 and start the background, does anybody have any initial questions before I would get started into exhibit 1? Okay, there should have been a discussion points that were included in your packet. So that is what I'd like to have you follow along with the conversation with this meeting. And then I'd like for the board to be able to reference the exhibit 1, which is what we have year-to-date tracking with respect to what year-to-date claims experience are, which impacts the reserve funding, which then also impacts whether or not we make rate recommendations or hold the rates going into the next plan year. We are 7 months into the year. Does everyone have access to exhibit 1? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Exhibit 1, you'll see in column C, row 1, our year-to-date, our current plan year 1920, actual 7 months worth of claims year-to-date, divided by 7 times 13 months, because it is a 12-month contract, but it does have run-out claims that are incurred and not paid yet. Our claims are projecting to be $5,297,000 year-to-date. Now, when we went into this year, those claims, if you look at column D, the same row 1, the well-marked projected claims for this plan year with this benefit design was $6,229,000. You have the fixed cost based on the current enrollment of $1,227,000 for each of those examples in column C and D. But you'll see the impact year-to-date, we are running $932,000 less than the actual expected claims that were given to us with Wellmark and by our calculations. I'll get into this later with the other exhibits, but we believe this is a combination of some significant large claimants that were incurred last year that were not being incurred this year, and in addition to COVID-19 with regards to the restrictions of access to health care. So although you do see the reduction of claims, I do believe this will correct itself, whether or not it be over the next several months or at some point through the end of this plan year. So it's actually 12% less. Does everyone understand, at least to that point, of what our claims are running to and what they were expected? Any questions there?
No, thank you for explaining.
Okay. Okay. If I move down in column C to the reserve line 4, the reserve funding factors that we set for last year at our renewal in an anticipated goal to fiscally make the funding of the reserve at 26%, we set the number to cover the cost of not only of the plan, the administrative costs and the claim costs, the $795 for single and the $1,813 for family was the dollar amount that would have covered our costs and kept the reserve at 26%. So as you can see and move down to line 5, a combination of the single premium and the family premium to the reserve fund totals $7.4,800,000 483,000, which you'll see what should have been 7,456,000, we were funding to the expected claim rates. So the variance in the planned funding cost is now 958,000 to the good, less expected claims on line 8, less expected fixed costs based on the current enrollment of 1,222,000 would leave a reserve balance fund of 3,681,000. That would put our reserve fund at 56% of overall plan cost. Now, our goal was 26%. Had our claims been what they were expected, we would have had a 10% margin of error, or our reserve fund would be projecting at 36%. Now, keep in mind, we're 7 months into the year. There's still a lot of the year left to go. And the reaction, of the COVID and the return of claims, I do believe you'll see the reserve that is growing, but I'm not sure that we should bank on the fact that this is any given normal year. Although I will say again, as I mentioned earlier, some of the catastrophic claims are not existing in this year's claim runs. If you look at column E, row 1, the Wellmark expected claim factors, in other words, what they expect all claims under 85,000 that would be incurred by the district would be 6,423,000. The administrative costs will be 1,439,000. Later in the exhibits, I'll have a breakdown of what those the actual fixed cost versus claim cost percentages are. But overall, with the enrollment, we're looking at a $406,000 increase. And it's my position that we're recommending a 0% increase in funding because of the year that we're having with the influx of the reserve and whether or not it will correct itself.
And so when you say funding, you're meaning the single and family?
Correct. Yeah, that what we would determine as a premium equivalence to keep the reserve fund at the adequate balance.
So nobody's premiums would increase is your recommendation?
Yes. Now, keep in mind, we have preliminary rates. So
Yep.
we've got a number of months that we could have a chronic condition that come up. Our rates will not be final until 90 days out.
Okay.
Wellmark's pretty consistent with final rates. So at this point, what I'm looking at with the current trend, with the reserve, regardless of what the renewal that Walmart gives us for their expected costs, I believe our reserve is healthy enough to absorb it and not make a knee-jerk reaction to what is, I believe, is an inconsistent year for claims.
Okay.
And so if in fact we were to end the year at a reserve in column C of 3.6 million, and we turn around and actually incurred the estimated claims of column C, row 1 of 6.4 million, all things being consistent, we would still be at almost 42% of a reserve funding, which is in a very good position, very sound position. So if in fact this did correct itself in that short a time frame, either way, that's where I get to really looking at the bigger picture of what we recommend for not changing the premium equivalence. Does anybody have any questions on this exhibit? I start with the reserve funding exhibit before we get into the details, just on the financial year-to-date analysis of what we're looking at to make the recommendations going forward.
This is Director Steckman.
Yes, sir.
My only question is, on an actuarial basis, we've had a number of retirements of older employees. We've had a number of newer employees. Has that affected our rates at all?
Well, it has, and that's a very good question, because what I would like to point out, as part of the renewal recommendation, we are implementing in transitioning, on 7/1 of this year, we have 16 members that are post-65 retiree on the health plan that we have been working on, and we will be transitioning those members to a voluntarily off of the self-funded group health plan and into a voluntary employer-sponsored group Medicare supplement program, which would be program plan F. And then they would have the option of enrolling in Medicare D of their choice, or an option of providing a solution on their own. You know, it was a little bit challenging when we ran into trying to transition the post-65 for those members that had not enrolled in a Medicare supplement or D at the time they first became eligible. So being able to implement and the actual retiree supplement program with guarantee issue and the ability to give them the drug card and or their choice, you are correct that that will have an impact, and I'll say a positive impact on the plan cost overall and the reserve, but that did not go into the consideration for Wellmark for this renewal because they've not come off the plan yet.
Well, thank you. Thank
that-
you for your explanation.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another complementary, which I think is a win-win for both, part of that supplement will also be that Wellmark will be offering a vision and hearing insurance coverage that's not currently available today. This will all be on an individually billed basis, even though it's a group plan. So members will be asked to ACH individually, and then this would have also an additional positive impact for efficiencies within the internal administration of the HR department. So they won't be billing and collecting premiums. So that will be another positive impact. In addition to the medical, on that note, we are also transitioning both the pre-65 retirees and the post-65 retirees into that entire population, which is about 50 of the employees, over to a fully insured individual Delta dental plan that was given to us on a group basis, but again, individually billed. And in both instances, between the medical and the dental plan, both of these products and recommendations that are being offered are not available in the individual market segment. So it's a win-win for the district, and it's a win-win for the employees that would not otherwise have access to either the Medicare supplement, the vision, the hearing, or the dental. So all that will play its course out as we finish this plan year. And that will also positively impact the dental plan because the dental plan is self-funded as well. And so that will be pulled out of our claims pool.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, and we'll get to Exhibit 4 as I move forward, but you know, the overall renewal being at 6.9%, along with what you brought up with the positive impacts that we're making with regards to the retiree provisions, that also goes into play, not making any premium equivalent recommendation changes. Moving forward, I put in Exhibit 2A and 2B, last year's renewal exhibit with regards to our goals for the reserve and what we were facing. That's nothing that I need to share with this meeting. I provided it as an informative information for your reference to see what we were overcoming with the new plan design with respect to what we had and what we were looking at from last year. Also, that's Exhibit 2A, and Exhibit 2E was a short summary of the benefit plan changes that we made, just at a high level spreadsheet. But in section Exhibit 4B, I actually included the entire medical and pharmacy plan document for your review in detail, if in fact you chose to want to review that plan benefit. Did anyone have a chance to review Exhibit 2A or 2B? I'll move on to the next exhibits in 3, unless anyone had any questions on those exhibits. Okay. In Exhibit 3A, 3B, 3C, and 3D, I would like to simply focus on Exhibit 3C. The other exhibits are what I've put in for substantiation and documentation that also help support the claims experience that we're experiencing. If everyone has access to what Exhibit 3C is, this report is referred to as a Quarterly Health and Pharmacy Key Indicators Report. We ran this report both for September plan year starting September 19, fourth quarter 19, and first quarter 2020. The other exhibit would be for the same time frame from last year, but I'll just go through my notes. If you'll look at the cost of care matrix on page 1, you'll see a total on the right-hand side of $4,272,000 of allowed charges or paid claims year to date. Does everyone see that number? This would be Exhibit 3C.
Yep, in the blue.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Notably, that our reserve is the actual year-to-date claims that are exceeding our expectations. You know, if I look at that same time frame from last year, that 4.2 million is actually down 875,000 from the preceding year. That, as we compare in the other exhibits, is a significant part, not necessarily of COVID, but of significant large claimants that were involved in that same time frame. Now, the question might be, is the cost sharing for the plan changes that we had year to date, would that have anything to do with maybe the excessive reserve, or not excessive, the reserve that we're experiencing? If you look at right below, the member cost sharing is 604,000 year to date. Now that is up 365,000 from the preceding year, but it is annualizing to $500,000 on an annual basis, which is actually below the annualized expectation of 650,000. So those same claimants are still incurring the deductibles. The claims are annualizing to what the underwriting actuarial expected cost share is, but it's not a direct it's not a direct reflection of anything to do with the impact of the reserve. Now, I will say that number will go down $65,000 because it was determined that it was given to us by Wellmark administration that they, for the months of September through January, September of 19 through January of 20, they had not been processing office visit exam co-payments correctly. And so they have issued for those impacted members, which were 257 members or over 400 claims, they'll be getting Wellmark has already mailed out corrected explanation of benefits, and those members will either have credit or get refunds at their provider. Wellmark is addressing a letter to each one of those members to be mailed out this week. So again, from what was set forth last year with the new plan design changes, the member cost share looks to be on par and actually less than what those expectations were.
So I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to go back to the Wellmark not processing the claims correctly.
Yes.
So that was with co-pays in regards to office visits, correct?
Yes, the changes that were made and summarized, the office visit exam itself should have been, to the member, 10%. Wellmark was processing the claims at the full office visit.
Okay.
What I was explaining with Wellmark is that they have their own audit department, And after any group that's a larger self-funded group, they'll conduct an audit 90 to 120 days. So they found this out in January, and they made the corrections internally. And I do believe it was in good faith that they disclosed this to us at this point in time.
So, but I would also say then that when we, as the board, put together the changes, because we did do some changes, and voting this in, then it was a lot of people upset
Yes.
with the process of how it went, because of what was explained and what happened, and then how it was processed seemed to be very different.
Yes,
And so we knew there were going to be copays and deductibles now, but the office visit copays were done incorrectly according to the plan that we voted in by Wellmark,
absolutely.
the actual carrier.
And we have that in writing.
And so
It'll
now
just
they're going to
update.
go back and fix that and going, well, and from February going forward, they have been processed correctly.
Correct.
Okay.
So from February going forward, they've been processed correctly, but they're making the corrections
From September to January now.
correct. And when their communications, the concern, that I would have, if I've already satisfied my deductible because I've had 4 office visits at full cost, now I'm getting a corrected explanation of benefits that say I've only got X amount
Okay.
and, 10%. Now I have to resatisfy the deductible. Well, that member is due and should be due the
The dollars
overpayment from the
paid.
provider.
Yep, okay.
And the providers have already been notified, so there'll be no action on the members. And we have, Wellmark, and we have identified who those members are, and they'll be mailed mailing directly from Wellmark Management.
Well, thanks. Thanks for staying on that and making sure that it got processed right.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes,
So as far as the members that it wasn't processed correctly, they've already been notified or will be? Help me out with that again.
I learned about this prior to asking for reports for this board meeting. So those
Sure.
EOBs, explanations were mailed out on April 17th.
Okay,
So that's assuming that anyone would pay very close attention to their explanation of benefits or understand it. But our HR department, we are to be given a list of those members that are impacted and explanations of what actions that member would need to take. And the HR department's completely on board and aware of what's been uncovered with us in the last 3 days.
right. And I am just wondering, as far as now, this could be, just tell me, everyone, if I'm going down the wrong path, but how about the people who don't get it? Because I do believe that there might be some younger people who don't get it that this might have happened to. I'm just wondering, does the district do anything, or is it all the insurance company that has to explain this? I just don't want somebody to get messed up with because they just don't know how
So the-
immense it could be.
So if
like
I could
paperwork or
interject.
whatever.
So if I could interject, so what happens is, from the provider's standpoint, Wellmark will issue a new EOB also to the provider, not just the individual. The provider then
Right.
by law has to do an adjustment. Therefore, there'll be a
Okay.
credit on that individual's account. And
Yeah.
so then the provider has to send that money back to the individual, or the next
Great,
time they
okay.
come in, they'll see they have a credit and ask them if they want it applied to the current visit, or do they want a written check back?
Great, thank you.
And to your
Thanks.
point, once we have the letter and it's targeted to those individuals, that will be emailed by the district. And we'll have
Okay.
a explanation in the email of why they're getting this letter from
Great.
Walmart and what action they should take.
Right,
And make that very, so that's a good question.
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
On this Exhibit C, if we look, other things that I've pointed out, if we look at office cost and utilization, that's on the bottom section, you'll see that in September of 19, under professional office visit count, if everyone is able to track, it was 781 in September, which was 340 more visits than the year previously. And then we'll have fourth quarter, the office visits were less, 400, and 28 from the previous year. And then in the entire first quarter, the office visits were down 298. So pretty consistent. Now, whether or not that was some consumerism or whether or not that was the word getting out with respect to, you know, the uncertainty of the office visit being paid at 10% versus the entire, I will say overall, there had been a spike in doctors on demand with regards to office visits. And by my statistics, just in the first quarter was an overall savings of $5,000 using doctors on demand, which I think is a positive outcome that we would see of this. So I do see some of the office visits being reduced. And then the concerns that we had were the, you know, the office visits being billed as outpatient. And so what we're told is 90% of the claims that were processed should have been for office visit at the 10%. So I feel like this has been a self-correction, and thank you for Walmart for at least allowing that to acknowledge that with the pushing, with the reporting that we were expecting. The second page of the Exhibit C, you'll see the very top with regards to office cost and utilization. You'll see that September 19 was 30,000, fourth quarter was 219,000, and then first quarter was 250,000. Now, in that first quarter, from comparing quarter 1 2020 to 2019, that is $1 million less than first quarter last year. We had some significant claims that were incurred in that period. So I can't say that the entire reduction of claims is due to COVID, but claim cost conditions. On an outpatient basis, that was pretty consistent. So just from a utilization perspective, I use Exhibit C as a snapshot. If in fact you wanted to look further into the claims, there were the other 3 exhibits that were under 3, unless anyone had any questions. This was just a snapshot of the indicators of the year-to-date claims in comparative to last year. If there's not any other questions on Exhibit 3, we're going to move straight to Exhibit 4. And we have Exhibit 4A, which is a one-page summary of the renewal itself. You'll see our current plan year with our current enrollment, 641 with 529 singles and 112 families. That actually totals about over 800 members that are enrolled in our health plan. And currently the renewal for the reinsurance claim cost was 25%, totaling $990,000. That reinsurance pays for every claim above $85,000 in our health plan. We're self-insured. Last year, Wellmark paid out over $1 million in reinsurance premium costs, so I can see the justification for coming back with the 25%. The overall administration and fixed costs was 2%. So an overall fixed cost renewal that includes reinsurance and administration was 17.32%, or $212,000. So you'll see where it went from 1.2 million to 227,000 to 1.439,000. If I drop down to the claim projection, you'll see that the claim projected from this year was 6,170,000, but we've reviewed the fact that the year-to-date claims are down to 5.2. If in fact we hit the claims of the Wellmark projection next year, that is a 4.09% in claims, estimated expected claims. If you add the admin costs and the expected claim cost factors, we would have an overall plan cost from 7.397 to 7,863,000, or a 6.29% renewal. So again, those are the significant part of the renewal would be if we hit those claims factors. So we do believe, and in the past, we've been pretty consistent hovering around the claims factors in years past. So with the healthy reserve, that would be the one item that would be voted on once we have final rates. Assuming this holds, that would be the Wellmark renewal. And then the reserve funding would be a business decision on the board's part. And then that would conclude at least the documentation that would document year-to-date experience, expected plan costs for this plan year, what's projected for next plan year, and the state of the reserve. Would anybody have any questions? I'm certainly available. With that being said, Dave?
Thank you, Tim. So we would expect about the June meeting, we'll have that renewal rate finalized.
Yes.
And make that business decision on the reserve fund, as we did last year.
Correct.
But again, to reiterate, at this point, we're not recommending any changes to the plan or to the cost to employees or to the board.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the evening.
Do you want to, is it you or Tom doing the discussion on the 2020 to 2021 school year?
That'll be me.
All right.
So we've included just a few slides for you to see that the Department of Ed posted the other day on what they're calling their return to learn summary. The details are not out, but I think it is interesting for us to consider the fact that they are going to give us 3 models of delivery for next year. This interim continuous learning, a version of the continuous learning plan that we are doing now that would be required and available in case of a disruption to education. So again, thinking that there might be another disruption in the fall, that's a plan that you could anticipate going to if there was another disruption. On the other end of it, it's the traditional instruction. So you plan to get back to the new normal with precautions in place for COVID-19. But it's going to be what we call the traditional approach. And then the blended approach is the one in the middle, a combination of continuous learning and the traditional instruction as things fluctuating and change as the year progresses. So we don't have any details about what the requirements or expectations are with either one of those 3 options. But that part's been made clear to us, and we're expecting this week we're going to hear the details of what those include. They did preview for the fact that you can see that areas of consideration include leadership, infrastructure, health and safety, academic content standards, learning requirements, social emotional behavior health, and equity. So that'll be our work between when the guidelines come out and the July 1 date for submitting the plan will be to work through those areas for our return to learn. So again, I would anticipate that probably the June meeting, we will have that completed and bring it to your attention. Whether it needs board approval or not, again, is not something we know at this time, but for sure we'll keep you informed about how we are progressing between now and then.
Okay. Is there any questions for Dave on that or discussion?
No, thank you.
I am just wondering about the equity aspect of it. When they talk about at-risk students, that does not mean like any student who is not passing an academic course. Like for instance, anybody who would not be passing, they would not be at risk. Is that correct? It would have to be other criteria?
We haven't seen any guidance on that. I just don't know what to say.
Okay.
It could be, could not be, But I would
Yeah.
say there would be a way to include people who are not passing in some aspect of an equity issue or of a service issue that you would need to plan for.
Okay. Yep. And I'm assuming, who knows about my assumptions, but as far as equity and with that, of course, they don't know, but I'm thinking about money for extra technology or whatever. I don't know. I'm just wondering if they said anything, but they obviously haven't.
Not yet, but we anticipate that is going to be an area of importance for us to consider,
Right.
and something for
Okay.
those care funds to be used for possibly.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Staffing plan update.
Okay, so for staffing, two handouts. First one's on page 26. It's a spreadsheet. It says staffing ratios. This is what we've used to have conversations with building principals about what changes in staffing they can see for next year. And again, we have to choose a date and time, and so the student numbers that we're using were from the February student count that we do, and then we roll those forward. So we just pretend that if there were 58 students in a grade on that date in February, there's going to be 58 students in that next grade at that same school the next year. So it's just a starting point. It's a place to have a discussion. But based on, again, keeping those ratios about the same for people, then that indicates how many more or less teachers we may need, depending upon what happened with student groups. So you can see at the top of the page at the elementary level, Harding would have zero change in staffing. It's basically the same number of students for the same number of teachers. And Hoover would have a -2, Jefferson would have a +1, and Roosevelt would be at 0 or remain the same. And then you can see Lincoln, they're having that bubble move on into John Adams. So Lincoln was down 3, John Adams is going to be up 2, no change at the high school. So overall, the sort toward the bottom of the page, you see positions reduced -5, positions added 4. So a net change of -1 for staffing. So that's where we're at with general education teachers for next year based on our projected enrollments. And again, this could change if, based on registration, we see large numbers of students at that first grade level in Hoover, for example, for next year. That could go to 4 sections very easily when that ratio gets into that kind of area compared to everybody else. But based on the current numbers, that's where we made an adjustment this year, for example. Any questions about that part?
I just might not be seeing it correctly, but what is your target then of student per teacher?
It's in that ratio. So if you look at the elementary, you see in kindergarten, it's trying to be in that 19 to 21 area per class.
Okay. So because I'm seeing 21.67, and
Yep.
so you're the gold line is kind of where you're wanting to be?
Well, the gold line tells you that's a change that we're going to be making.
Okay.
The minus, the blue line is a plus, but it's just that range of trying to be between 18 and 21
18 and 21.
for the
Okay.
kindergarten, and right around 20 if you want to say that, but it's never going to be like an exact number. So
Okay.
we're trying to use that range between 18 and 21 for first and second, or kindergarten and first grade, and maybe second grade. But as we get older, the ratio goes up a little bit. You can see the ratio for high school kids gets to be that 23, 24 range. So it's just a guide that we're trying to keep it about the same as it was the previous
Okay.
year or the prior year.
So you're using a range a little bit of a low
We're
and a
more of a
high
range than a specific
than a
number.
number, okay.
So it's flexible. We can have conversations with principals about what that looks like for a particular group of students or in a particular setting, or for a variety of reasons that may change what we want to do.
Okay.
The second page refers to the special education side of our staffing. The handout tells you what our goal is for this year. The teacher-wise, we have 76 special education teachers in the district next year, and that our goal for next year is to continue with the same 76 teachers. or same number of positions, put it that way. They're used a little bit differently. Where we're strategizing for next year is in having less paraprofessionals. So that's, you can see the, in the left-hand, or column 2, it says SE para, special ed para. So Jefferson's goal is to have 11, Harding's is to have 12, 10 SE and 2 ECSC, that's early childhood, and so forth. So overall, that's, we're looking at a reduction of about 30 paras from what we have this year to next year if we can meet this plan. And so that's been done through Heidi Venom's work and principals' work with analyzing IEPs and making some adjustments into particular the one-to-one para assignments that come out of specific IEPs. So that analysis has been done, and that sort of allocation of those positions has been shared with principals. And we don't anticipate that this is going to be any sort of terminations for people. I mean, we have a large amount of turnovers in paras every year. So it's really just a reallocation of positions and absorbing of the ones for which people don't come back to. So we regularly turn over 30 to 40 paras every year. So it's, some people may get a different assignment, but we don't, our goal is anybody that's coming back that wants to come back will come back. We're only going to absorb these positions through attrition.
Okay.
And we're well on our way with the number of resignations and retirements that we already anticipate for next year. So that's where we're at with staffing. And again, we look at the special ed differently because it's funded differently than the general ed. But again, it's an area that we really felt that there needed to be some adjustments in, and we feel like we've made a major step in that this year, or for next year, based on this year's numbers. Any questions for
Dave?
Tom or I about that?
This is Director Steckman. Have you already had feedback from any of the principals?
Yes.
Is there anything we should be aware of?
No, they were very
Okay.
positive meetings. Cabinet level, Susan Pesanowski, Heidi Venom, Chair Yoder, Tom, myself met with each principal, talked about the rationale for the allocation, and we've been doing that. We started doing that in early March and April, so I think plans are well in place to make those changes for next year.
So
Okay.
then
Thank you.
my question would be, because some of the EAPs say they have to have a one-on-one, and
Correct.
then we would have to, if we were at your target mark, but we had
Correct.
a child, they changed that, you would have to
Yes.
give them a one-on-one, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it is in the wording of that and what that means.
Okay.
And all of those have been reviewed and re-identified for those who really needed that one-on-one for that particular need versus somebody who needed, for example, access to an adult at a certain time of the day. So,
Okay.
yeah, so that's based on student needs. So again, we're not changing something that can't be changed. It can be changed and thus adjusted.
Okay.
We'll turn it over to Tom to talk about the updates and the next reiterations of our employee pay plans that the board's been working on this year.
So we'll start on page 30 of your handout. There's an overview of the miscellaneous non-exempt unified pay schedule. These are our hourly miscellaneous employees. The pay scale is based on the teacher's starting pay minus $4,300. There are no material changes really in the unified pay plan that we presented a month ago, except that we applied the plan to our current employee groups. And the current pay for bus monitors, behavioral interventionists, food service managers, and IT techs is fairly congruent with the pay plan. But where disparities are a little more evident is when we apply the plan to building secretaries, building level administrative assistants, and district administrative assistants. So I'm going to have you flip over to page 32 of your handout. And this is, for the most part, the same as what you saw a month ago. The pay grades are assigned for each position. We have placeholders or our collectively bargained groups, which actually have a different pay schedule than what you see here. That is part of those collective bargaining agreements. But you see what starting pay is for those positions relative to our non-bargained employees. So that's really the basis for the plan. Page 33 are the bus monitors. Like I said earlier, they're fairly well aligned, their current pay with the plan. And the thing for our behavioral interventionists on page 34. But I would like you to take a look at page 35, which are the building secretaries. And as you look at this, you'll see the numbers in red showing that our the pay plan results in a lower amount for those that are kind of in the middle of the plan, and an increase for those that are at the top of the plan. So there are some discrepancies there, and we'll talk about those as I get along in the presentation here and some possible options. On page 36 with our building level administrative assistants, it follows pretty well for 2 out of 3, but there's one that it would result in a substantial increase for with the application of the plan. And then with our district, or I'm sorry, with the food service managers, it aligns fairly closely the plan and current pay on page 37. And on page 38, when you apply the plan to our current district level administrative assistants and their pay, there's wide variation from the plan to the positive and negative for this, for the most part, rather experienced group, except for our most recent hire for the benefits HR position. And I think this is indicative of there being a lack of a pay plan in the past or a view towards internal equity. And so there's very wide variation with that group. So, and then page 39, the last group covered under the unified plan are the IT techs. And that's fairly closely aligned. There's one position there that we may need to look at. So in my cover memo for this group, I talked about some options, and this is going back to page 31. What to do when you've got people that are paid above what the plan prescribes. There's a number of options. You can do nothing and just give people a percentage increase. What that does is for those that you do apply the plan to, and those that you don't, you result in pay being less in line with the pay plan, but you also run a much lower risk of turnover of employees when you do that. Another option is freezing pay until the plan catches up to that individual's pay. That's generally not real appealing to the employees, and it may result in a higher risk of turnover. sometimes you give a smaller annual percentage increase to an employee whose pay is greater than the plan until the pay plan catches up to the employee's pay. There is less risk of turnover for that, or we decrease the individual's base pay to align with the plan. And that, of course, increases your risk of turnover. A couple other options for administrative assistants and building secretaries might be within the unified pay schedule itself to modify the pay accordingly there, or develop completely separate pay plan apart from the unified plan, which really gets us away from where we wanted to go for the administrative assistants and the building secretaries. So I'm happy to answer questions about the pay plan for this particular group. Get your thoughts on possible alternatives for those that are making more than what the pay plan prescribes at this point, and obtain your feedback for the miscellaneous non-exempt employees.
I worry about freezing pay, but I also worry about giving a smaller increase than someone else, because I don't know how that would look from an HR standpoint. If 3 people in the group got 1.5% and one person in that same group got, 0.5% raise, could that cause other legal issues by doing that?
Not if you've got a stated plan that the intent is to equalize pay under a pay plan. If you've got a legitimate non-discriminatory reason for making those changes, you'll generally stay out of trouble.
Okay. So this is the committee of the whole meeting, and I feel a little different sitting here like it's a board meeting. This is like normally where we would talk quite a bit and ask questions quite a bit. I'm just wondering, does anybody have those questions?
Yeah, the question, I just have to get this, I have to have this wrapped around my head here. So the people that are on a list, like example, just using building secretaries without names, anyone who's in the red, in the right column, are you saying that according to, if we're gonna equate it, they're getting paid less or more?
If they're in red, their current
Yes.
pay is more than what would be prescribed by the pay plan.
Right.
Now, I want to make it clear that that doesn't mean that they're being paid too much right now.
Right.
What that says, this is illustrative of applying the plan and just strictly applying the plan. This is what the results would be.
Right. Right.
This is Director Steckman. The plan is basically length of time. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what was that?
They said the plan is basically length of time in the job, correct?
No.
That is correct, yes.
So it's non-discriminatory. It's just basic time.
Correct.
Thank you.
Now, the basis for the plan may change as a result of negotiations with MCEA, because remember, we based it on the starting salary minus 4,300. So as we look at next year, those numbers may change. We can bring this information back to you and show you what those numbers would be once negotiations with MCEA are complete.
Did
This
anybody?
is Dirk.
Oh, go ahead.
With the negotiation, I think I would feel, I mean, I think we would have better numbers to look at waiting until, is that something where you think we could, that process would wrap up with, the Mason City Education Association, and then you still having time to see how that would transpire on these, sheets to then allow us to make action to set the pay scale before the next school year? Would that be too tight of a timeline, or do we have time to just absorb this and just sit on this and wait until that process is completed? And still have time to look at this and for us to adopt it and come up with a plan for next school year?
I think we could. What do you
Yeah,
think?
we
Dave?
definitely can do that.
Yeah.
That's why we're just trying to keep it in front of you so that that's exactly how we want you to think about it, is you start to see how the formula works, but let's get those final numbers based on what that settlement is with MCEA and our other unions. And then you can see actually what it means and how you might want to make adjustments or changes to that. So we're going to keep putting it in front of you as each meeting, because that's exactly how we want this to be viewed. Of course, we have an exempt session after this meeting to talk about negotiations. We have that next meeting with MCA settled. So, I mean, potentially, we could be in agreement by Wednesday afternoon. And the next meeting, we could be bringing you those settlement numbers for all the unions. So, yes, we agree with you, Jake, on that perception.
Is there any other questions or comments? Okay, then that is it for our cow meeting. Is that correct, Dave?
No.
No, we have another one?
That was just one pay plan. Tom, did you want to talk about some of the others?
Yeah,
Oh, I went all
moving
the way
on to
through it.
page 40, the pay plan for supervisors and miscellaneous exempt employees. And we have presented something similar probably a couple months ago. We've got 7 supervisor positions that are listed there at the top of page 40. Unfortunately, the comparables that we get from IASB really only have reliable data for 3 positions that equate to our food service supervisor, our supervisor of facilities, and our transportation and ground supervisor. When you look at those numbers in the table at the middle of the page, what is pretty evident is that comparatively, our food service supervisors at the very low end of that comparable range, and all 3 are below the medians and averages for those comparables. But given our list of comparables, we should have information from 9. The most we have is 7. Some of that has to do with, for example, districts that contract out for food service wouldn't have a food service director. So that limits the data as well. If you look at page 41, the layout of the plan, there, as far as how we assign the factors, there are 3 criteria. One is consideration given based on the number of years the employee has worked in his or her specific position. And then tiers are assigned based on the supervisory status of the position. For example, positions that oversee both a program and a number of employees are assigned a greater factor than those that oversee a program but have no responsibility for supervising employees. And then considerations also given for educational level of the employee above the minimum required for the position. So if you look at page 42, this lays out the structure of the plan. And so when you look at the supervisory tier, there are 4 different tiers for that based on number of employees, whether they're year-round employees or not, whether they supervise a program, whether they're an assistant supervisor, and then just other exempt. For educational level, no credit is given for meeting the minimum required by the job description. And that's based off of comments from last month's meeting when we were looking at the director pay plan. But then a factor is given for each degree so that, and then we list there specifically what sort of degree is required for each position, so that you know whether it should be assigned 0 because it meets minimum, or whether it qualifies for a factor. So when you apply this plan on page 43, the plan results in increases for the IT director, food service supervisor. Currently, also, if you look at that, our software supervisor and the supervisor of electronics, AV, and communications are higher than the pay plan, but they started, the pay for those positions started where they were for internal equity. Also, there would be significant increases for the assistant supervisor of facilities and the assistant supervisor of grounds. And again, this is just based on application of the pay plan to where we're at right now. So what questions do you have about the supervisor and miscellaneous exempt plan? And again, this is based on the, has its basis on starting salary minus 4,300 for teachers. And so this is, the numbers are subject to change as well.
This is Director Steckman. Where did you derive your factors from?
Can't hear you.
Where did you derive your factors from?
The factors were similar to what we used last year that the board adopted for our building administrators, for the building principals.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the district director's plan then, Tom.
So a month ago, we spent quite a bit of time on this and had quite a bit of discussion on the district director's plan. Based on that discussion, I removed the award of factors for meeting the minimum education and certification requirements. There was a suggestion that for those positions that require a higher degree to increase the base salary for those. And so that's what I did for the 2 more academically driven positions, Director of Special Education and Student Services, and the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Then the base pay for Director of Finance and HR Director stayed the same. What it resulted in was a lowering of the low end of the salary range for all the positions, resulted in the high end increasing for the 2 more academic positions, and then the high end decreasing for the Director of Finance and the Human Resources Director. The one kind of glaring inconsistency that I would point out, I highlighted, and that is the pay for Director of Special Education and Student Services. And so I wanted to make sure I called your attention to that. Even when you look up at the top of page 45 with the comparables, the current pay is quite a bit lower than the averages and median for that particular position. But again, we can update these numbers for next month.
So your base pay on the 2019, 2020 for these positions are what they're making, what their contract is right now, correct? Okay.
Correct, yep.
And so
So-
that's the base salary. So what your base pay on the next line, I'm on the very bottom, on page 45, where it says position, your bottom, where it says plan, salary and comparable range, that little box. So you have base salary 2019 through 2020, and then you have base pay. I need you to track that for me, how we got from, is that where you put the factors in? We went from 103 like to 108 on that first one, or is that the 2% increase? I'm just trying to, the math behind that cube right there.
If you look up above, the base pay for Director of Special Ed and Director of Curriculum
Uh-huh,
is the 108,965. If you look above, right underneath where it says, and I do apologize for the size of this font, but I tried to cram it all into one page. If you look under Table B, it says base pay Director of Special Ed and Student Services and Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction equals the midpoint of starting pay for a level 3 building administrator. So that's where that comes from.
so that's the midpoint.
And then this was unchanged from last time. The base pay for Director of Finance and HR Director is the midpoint of starting pay for a level 2 building administrator. And that stayed at the 105.26. No change from last time.
And then you add those factors in, Jody, as you
Right,
you
go
see
across, yep.
Yep, with that,
Yeah.
and so that would be the 1920 salary based on the plan, which is where his difference comes from.
And as we get closer and refine this more, and consider what we're going to do with the pay plans, there are a number of options available. You can do nothing and pay a straight % increase to all miscellaneous employees like you've done in the past. You can address certain groups with a pay plan. You could address just the hourly employees or a portion of the hourly employees. That's completely up to you. Or you could say we're going to step back and not do anything this year, pay everyone a certain increase, and address certain individual positions that I highlighted in the position or in the presentation that may be more significantly lower than their comparables. And so there's a number of options to consider as we move forward.
This is Director Schweitzer. The very bottom of that page 45, on the very bottom end, you have the 4 cabinet level positions, for lack of a better term. and you have the base salary for 2019, 2020, and that's their pay currently for this year.
Correct.
Okay, and then you have with the plan, the base pay plus all the factors, and then it comes up with the currently as it is now, the 2019, 2020 salary base on the plan that we have in front of us. That gives us the difference. So I'm looking at the first one, Director of Special Education, the 2019, 2020 base. So going back to the very beginning, 1035. And then on the plan, they put them at 111, 689 with a difference of negative 800 and 159. How do we go from 103 to 111 and then have a negative difference in pay?
That's subtracting where they're at, or that's subtracting the pay plan from where they're at right now. So that's showing that they're 800 or $8,159 below the pay plan.
Okay. Where everybody else is currently above the pay.
Correct. A
Okay.
positive number, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So as we discussed with earlier pay plans, these are decisions that you will have to make as we start to settle with these other groups, and what do you want to do with these particular non-bargained, non-union groups as we've developed. So informational only again tonight about what these pay plans look like. As Tom stated, how you apply these pay plans is the decision to be made once we start talking about wages and raises for next year based on where we go with the union raises that we are in the midst of working on right now.
Well, I like this pay plan better because I specifically remember, and I don't have my papers with me, that we were not even hitting, we were over like the comparable range. I know it was
Right.
harder on these, but we were way over the median on some of the positions, and how he's factored it this time. We're in a comparable salary range, with the difference though for the Director of Special Education and Student Services. So was that changing?
It was changing we do not give you a factor for the required minimum educational level, whereas in the last plan, it
We
had a
did,
factor.
okay, that's the difference, okay.
Right. So, yeah, that's at zero.
Yep, okay.
So it lowered the numbers, yes.
I hadn't got that
Okay.
detailed in reviewing it this weekend, so I appreciate that.
So more to see on that. So that ends our informational items tonight, and now after we close out, we'd like the board members to stay on. Tom and Sherry and I will stay on, and we'll have an exempt session and bring you up to date on negotiations.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions for Tom or Dave or Sherry?
No, thank you.
Okay, give us a minute as Joel shuts off the meeting, and we'll move on to the next phase. Thank you.